Gators Breakdown episode 43 is live and ready to go. And this is the big one. Even bigger than what we thought it would be coming in as of about a week ago. It is our signing day recap show here on Gators Breakdown. And joining me, as he does always, is Joey. And Bill joined me last week, and Bill joins us again here for this signing day recap. You can find Joey on Twitter at JoeyV_ACC Sports. And now Bill is on Twitter as well, Bill Sykes at Real B Sykes. So, guys, what a day. I think it kind of caught us by surprise a little bit. I think we knew with the open spots Florida had that, of course, they were going to climb in the rankings. We kind of questioned if it would be top 10 or not. Florida snuck in there with 3 out of the 4 big recruiting services, and some big surprises kind of hit us late right before Jim McElwain's press conference. So, Joey, I'll start with you, man. Just a quick roundabout, well-rounded, what in the heck happened, and what did you think of this class?
Well, David, we talked 48 hours ago,
Yeah.
and we had assumed that the only way that this class got in the top 10 was if they had 2 or 3 huge 5-star commits that just happened to pick the Gators, and it didn't end up that way. Florida still finished with the top 10 class, but they did it in different ways. That Florida, pulled off a masterful signing day. This was definitely Jim McElwain's best close in his 3 years at Florida. This is his 3rd off season. And, just to kind of begin the day with the Daryl Slayton commitment, and we kind of expected that. And then to kind of finish the day, kind of pulling a rope-a-dope and a cloak and dagger over all Gator fans' eyes. And signing James Robinson. We just talked about that Monday night about, how somebody would be getting a stellar athlete, a stellar wide receiver at basically a bargain price. So today was just crazy. This is like, we talked about Monday. Things were changing by the hour leading up to signing day, and they were changing by the hour today. I mean, it was absolutely nuts. This last 72 hours before today were just crazy, and it just culminated with another crazy day today. And my hat's off to Jim McElwain for basically ignoring the people that we've been lambasting for the last 2 weeks. The Fire McElwain people, ignoring them and basically shutting 99% of them up. The 1% you're never going to shut up, but 99% of them got shut up today. And Florida's going to the offseason with a huge bowl win over a Big Ten team and a huge signing day. I mean, that's momentum that's going to carry you into the Michigan game in September. And I'm a firm believer in momentum. Spring practice is probably going to have a little more pep in the step in a couple weeks. Players are excited. I mean, you saw the response from the current players on Twitter today. I mean, they're excited. This class was put together with integrity, was put together the right way, was put together with hard work and in sweat and guts. And, McElwain sealed the deal with CJ Henderson, sealed the deal with Brian Edwards, sealed the deal with James Robinson today. He could put his stamp and footprint on guys like that today.
That's right. Bill, I think we knew it would be fun today. I don't think we knew it would be this fun. As we mentioned, the South Florida coup McElwain got, and like Joey said, the big surprises we know with Robinson kind of, we thought he was going or not coming to Florida with everything we heard as of 2 days ago, and now Robinson's on his way. What did you think about the whole day? And I guess we could kind of start yesterday too well with the Elijah Conliffe commit.
Yeah, well, Conliffe was a big one, and he's one of my favorites in the class, which I would definitely love to talk about him as we move forward in the show. But overall, this is what every fan wants out of a national signing day. I mean, it's high drama. It worked out a lot in the Gators' favor. You saw your class rise rapidly in the rankings, and I'm sure you guys know that a lot of times we've had good classes over the years, and it just doesn't quite feel the same. If you're already sitting, even at like number 1, 2 weeks out, you have nothing to look forward to. It's like opening your presents, for Christmas on December 10th, but it didn't work out that way today. It was a roller coaster ride, and it was a fun one. I think McElwain came into the day really in the end of the last week or so here with his back against the wall. And I think, he has been criticized at times for laying back, kind of being an easygoing guy and kind of letting things fall to him. And I do think we see some of that in this class, and it's representative of that. But at the same time, I think he made some aggressive moves that if they work out, we're going to say they're boss moves. But it's going to be a high-risk, high-reward situation with some of the guys he brought on board, including James Robinson. And so we're going to have to wait and see what happens.
Right.
The quote of the day, David, the quote of the day is Mark Richt still can't beat Florida. And he's not even at Georgia anymore. So that's today's quote of the day, and I love it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the trash talk the last few days between Florida and Miami has been epic, and it took another step today. I got blasted on one of the message boards for my comment of Miami helped Florida more than they'll ever know. Kind of going back to the Randy Shannon comment after they did not like that. I got pretty blasted on the message board there, but all is good. All is good there. So let's finish up here. So 24/7 has Florida's class as of right now ranked 10th. Scout also have Florida's class finally ranked at 10th. Rivals snuck in at number 9 there. I think Joey said he saw it as high as 8 at one point. So some fluctuation there. So there, and ESPN, the outlier, who has Florida at number 15. Just a quick hit on that, guys. What do you think about all these different recruiting services and the different rankings? And I know we quickly hit on that before we jumped in here. And I know we all follow different ones out there personally ourselves. I guess you see Florida 10th in 2 of them, 9th in 1 of them. So I would assume, that looks like those recruiting services pretty much base their rankings kind of the same way. But it is ESPN out there who is the outlier and has Florida 15th. Is there a certain way to look at that? Is, do you just look at, Florida's number 9 in Rivals, so that's the one we go with?
Joe, you want to take that first? Or do you want me to go with?
Go ahead, Bill.
For me, as you guys know, I really like the numbers. I like facts. I like to try to reduce the cloudiness around these things. And at the end of the day, this is a business that's based on arbitrary opinions. And so I think anytime you're dealing with identifying trends, identifying correlations, and kind of sifting through such opinions, there's strength in numbers. And so for me, that's why when I have the opportunity, I like to rely on the 24/7 composite, because it does take their own services rankings. It takes Rivals. It takes ESPN. It takes Scout. And of course, they can't admit that. But you get a little bit of an aggregator and an average, and they're going to put that in there. And I think that, you have a lot of guys putting different human eyes with subjective opinions on a guy. But when you've got 4 different professional services doing it, you're getting a little clearer picture. And I think there's some safety there. And that's not to say it's exact, but I think it helps.
Yeah, I agree, Bill. And a little breaking news, actually. 24.
There you go.
Just announced that they purchased Scout. So maybe Hollywood Bob Redmond will be working for 24/7 Sports in the near future. We all know Hollywood Bob has been around the Florida program for about 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
Him and Pat Dooley have been there since the Stone Age. A little bit of breaking news there. But I agree, Bill, with you. ESPN to me is very opinion-based, and I don't like that. ESPN kind of picks and chooses who they want to be ranked in the top 100, the top 200, whatever. And I just don't like that. Like you said, 24/7 composite kind of takes in account for everything. It's kind of like the BCS, it takes in account for the Harris poll, the AP poll, and the computers. It's kind of like the college football playoff. It's just a group of guys that get together and say, hey, this guy's being looked at by Clemson, Alabama, Florida State, Texas, Notre Dame, pretty much 30 top elite schools. Okay, so he's definitely a top 100 prospect. Not taking into account it, maybe the kid, had a terrible year last year. It's just, so I completely agree with you there. It's all subjective though. You can kind of get an idea where Florida's class ranks just by taking into account for all of them. Florida had a top 10 class. Okay, let's just throw that out there. ESPN could have them at 15. Florida had a top 10 class. Florida jumped 15 spots in a matter of 3 days. I mean, that's incredible. So It all started with the Elijah Conliffe commit yesterday, which, might I say, was one of the best commits I've ever seen in my
Totally
life.
agree
The
with
fact
you, man.
that they blew the orange and blue confetti, the entire crowd, was
And
phenomenal. I think,
his friends coming out in each different school's outfit, and
yeah.
But, I don't think I've ever seen a guy that better captured the right vibe. It was celebratory. It was fanfare, but it seemed respectful and heartfelt at the same time. The guy was completely appreciative of the schools and of his parents. It was really cool to see.
Absolutely. And do you see how big he is? Oh my goodness. He is going to
scares me to
eat
death.
quarterbacks alive. Yeah.
I think we're ready to see him because, of course, and we'll talk about it. I mean, he is at a position of need for the Gators. That's one reason he's one of the biggest commits for the Gators. He's going to be sliding in, maybe getting some. I mean, it's tough to ask a freshman to come in and play defensive tackle in the SEC, but it looks like he has that mold and body to come in and do that. And one day we'll talk more about that. And I guess I should preface before we move on. We can't go on the show, go through every single recruit. We just don't necessarily have time for that. So we're going to hit some topics going on and kind of just fill you guys in. But if you want to see who's out there, it's easy enough to look up and see the list of recruits before we move on. So this is Gators Breakdown. You're listening to our signing day recap. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Joey on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports, and Bill on Twitter at RealB Sykes. So I guess this can be a pretty loaded question, and I kind of hate to do it, but I think it bears to be asked. How did Jim McElwain and the Gator staff do this?
They closed. I mean, they closed. We heard reports last night that McElwain was working the phones with CJ Henderson and Brian Edwards all the way up until late last night. I mean, that just goes to show the dedication that Jim McElwain had to make sure that this class was set, not only for momentum and for kind of, I guess, fanfare, going into the offseason, but he wanted to make sure that every need on this team was filled. We talked about in the past, David, where, we needed defensive tackles. Defensive tackle was addressed. Needed linebackers. Linebacker was addressed. Needed defensive backs. Defensive backs was obviously addressed. And 9 returning starters on offense. Didn't really have to pay too much attention to the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, James Robinson's a huge pickup. 4-star wide receiver, absolute stud. But the defensive side of the ball is where you didn't have the depth that you have had in the last couple of years. And he did that. And I think he was masterful at, we always say about 3 stars, at Florida, and, people tease us about 3-star university. Jim McElwain's not looking at star rankings the way other programs fall victim to star rankings, David. He's actually trying to evaluate talent and trying to out-evaluate other schools. And that's how you win games. Granted, yes, you need the 5 stars, you need the 4 stars, but, a lot of times these recruiting services don't exactly get to see every player in the country. I mean, they don't. A lot of players don't have the financial ability to go to these camps, David, and get the star ratings. A lot of them can't afford to go, to the Rivals camps or to the Nike camps and all that, and don't have the coaches that will take them. Or, in Nick Smith's, position, what we talked about on Monday is he was sitting behind as a junior some pretty good linebackers at his high school, and he used the opportunity that he had as a senior to really make himself known. He had 1 year essentially to make himself known. And don't tell me for one second that Adarius Lemons wouldn't have been a 4-star and probably one of the top 4 or 5 backs in the entire country if he had actually played his senior season. Adarius Lemons in his junior year was considered the #1 running back in the state of Florida. So, this is an evaluation process, and Jim McElwain obviously has an eye for talent, and he used it to the best of his abilities. And he's a closer, and that's what he showed this time around. This is his 3rd class that he's recruited, and he absolutely did a sensational job these last 48 hours.
about you, Bill? How did Jim McElwain close this class? And I mean, but plainly simple. I mean, of course, we don't know exactly how he do it, how he did it, but if you had to, from the tea leaves from today and the recruits that he brought in, and maybe even his press conference, how did Jim McElwain bring this class in?
Well, and I would like to get into some of the numbers to analyze this, but before we do, just in a general sense, I think that Jim McElwain identified winnable battles. I think that was the theme of this. And I think that he did not challenge the upper echelon schools head-to-head very often for recruits in this cycle. I think he set out to say, where are the guys we can sign? Where are the areas we can operate in? He camped out in Miami and found a strategic advantage on the recruiting trail over University of Miami, completely owned them, signed almost half his class out of the 3 South Florida counties with 10 players. He found guys really that was a shoestrings and bubblegum, bad news bears kind of approach that, I mean, I don't mean to throw shade, but your top guys were generally didn't have a lot of options, even though they are talented guys. And he piecemeal together one heck of a class. And I think there was a lot of hustle. I think there was some reckless abandon towards the end to lock these guys down. I think they did flex some muscle over Miami, who, again, I think they kind of have a pecking order status advantage over at the time, and he locked it down.
Right, and to dive, I mean, I know you got more numbers, Ben, and I'll share what Thomas Goldcamp of 24/7 tweeted out. The final tally of top 50 players from the state of Florida: Florida with 11, Miami with 8, Florida State with 8. So we talked about how Florida, if they want to start turning this thing around, has to really start recruiting better in state. Now, while they didn't get the elite guys in state, they got poached by Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan. At least the numbers are there. And Bill, I know you got some numbers on that of how Florida turns this thing around.
Florida State didn't even get the top talent in the state. You're right, David. Right. Yeah. They were poached from out-of-state programs, Ohio State, Alabama, and you're Michigan. You're correct. You're exactly right. And don't forget, a lot of those. That's a very skewed number, and I'm sure Bill can kind of add to this. Those IMG kids are not Florida kids, okay? And most of those IMG kids are your top 10, top 15 talent in the state, quote unquote. Those IMG kids grew up in California, Nevada, Texas, Ohio. They're from all over the place. They never had any allegiance to any Florida school growing up. So to get kids out of IMG Academy, to me is just, it's kind of a brush of the shoulder. It's all well and good, but you can't, 10 years ago, IMG wasn't what it is now. So, those numbers are just skewed as far as in-state prospects. So Florida still is trying to build a wall around the state, which they should, because they have for 20 years. Steve Spurrier built a wall around the state of Florida, and Ron Zook continued it, and Urban Meyer continued it. And Will Muschamp, he did a little bit to some. Will Muschamp kind of strayed a little out of state, but I could tell now Jim McElwain's trying to continue it, and that's what Florida needs to do. Florida State fans and Miami fans will argue, but University of Florida is the flagship program of the state of Florida, okay? It is. It just is. It's been for 50 years. Florida State didn't even have a football team, 60 years ago. Florida's fielded a football team for, 100 years. University of Florida is the flagship program of the state of Florida, and that's what it is. It is what it is. University of Florida is a public Ivy school. It's one of the elite research universities in the world, one of the top athletic universities in the world in everything, thanks to Jeremy Foley. So it's the flagship university. And at the University of Florida, you should be able to build a wall around the state of Florida and get, 11 recruits out of the top 50.
Well, that's all great, man, but Florida's not exactly the flagship of taking elite talent out of their own state right now. And I mean, you can say what you want about Florida State, but they got Joshua Kando, who was at IMG. He wasn't out of state or was a 5-star, but they also got Stanford Samuels, number 6 in the state from Hollywood, Florida, not at IMG. They got DJ Matthews out of Jacksonville Trinity Christian, which ought to be considered Florida's backyard. They got Cyrus Fagan out of Daytona Mainland. And I know that's a little bit of a pipeline, but just looking at the top 20, that's guys, and that's not adjusted for IMG, which I do acknowledge that's something we got to adjust for. But the only guy that Florida got in that top 20 was Tadero Slayton, who about a week ago had a top 2 of Florida and Kentucky after being dropped by Michigan for academics. So, I mean, the wall around Florida right now is maybe a chain link fence. They've got to get that fixed. And the numbers are showing that while they are taking those guys, they're in that mid-range. And I'd like to give a shout out to SU Gator, who pointed this out on the 24/7 boards. Florida is retracting in almost too much, taking 75% of their class, and in their state, half of that in 3 counties in South Florida that's not even in their pipeline area. So what's happening, I think, is they don't have the muscle to flex the I-4 corridor right now. You've got Alabama camping out. You've got Ohio State camping out, Florida State camping out. And while they're taking good Florida talent for the bulk of their class, a lot of these elite programs that are above them, those top 7, 8 programs, are taking great talent. And right now, if they don't get that fixed, it's going to be like bringing a knife to a gunfight every year when you play FSU and get to the SEC title game.
I wasn't specifically talking about currently, Bill, about Flagship University. I'm talking about in the last 20 years. I'm not specifically even speaking on football, Bill. I'm speaking on academics and athletics in general. The University of Florida is the flagship university of the state. It has run athletics. I'm not talking about just football. Like I said, softball, gymnastics, basketball. When's the last time Florida State was good in basketball up until the last year or two? I'm just speaking in general. I'm just speaking in general as far as that. So, when people think of the state of Florida over the last 20 years, a majority of people outside the state of Florida are going to think of the Florida Gators just because the Florida Gators have been front and center, since the Spurrier days. Florida State didn't start getting good again until Jimbo Fisher took over. Don't forget, Florida State was pretty irrelevant for about 7 or 8 years there in the mid-2000s, Bill. And Miami has been irrelevant, we know, for about 12 years. So, that's what I was speaking of on that. But I completely agree. Florida's not pulling the elite talent, but I'm sorry, Bill, Nick Saban's ruined college football. He's ruined recruiting. He takes whoever he wants. Whenever he wants, he'll sign 40 guys. And basically, it's like, it's the mentality, that people use, shoot first, ask questions later. That's just what it is. He'll take 40 guys and let them sort them out after, signing day. Right. We just saw Jarez Parks is going to gray shirt. Jarez Parks was a 4-star, one of the top defensive players in the state. And, he's so desperate to go to Alabama that he's basically going to take an entire year away from football just to go there next January. So Nick Saban has ruined recruiting in the state of Florida. He's ruined recruiting in all over the Southeast United States and the West Coast. He's starting to dig into with Najee Harris. Can't use Alabama as a measuring stick, Bill, because they're just a different animal. And once Nick Saban retires, we'll start seeing college football come back to earth to where it used to be. And that's just how it is. Nick Saban uses the dog and pony show to get recruits. He flashes the rings. He shows them the big, 6,000 square foot house. We saw the article on ESPN that was published the other day, the 50 golf carts, the big lake, the lake and the boats and all kinds of other stuff, and that'll all go away.
Fly helicopters.
Landing in people's schools. So we can't use that as a measuring stick. And Urban Meyer also is not a measuring stick. Urban Meyer might be the best recruiter in college football has ever seen. Urban Meyer can go in your living room and if you got, if you have no heat, he'll sell you a box of ice cubes. He's just an incredible recruiter. That's just who he is. That's who he's always been. And, so those two guys, I'm kind of going to separate from your argument, but I agree on everything else, Bill. I agree.
Well, I just like to say I'm not the one using Saban as a measuring stick. To me, I agree with you. I think that you've got to give Alabama some room to say, well, they're going to steal a couple of top guys out of your state right now because there's just a juggernaut. And I get that, man. But when I'm looking at this Florida list, they are not the sole problem. And what's really happened, though, you've seen nationally, you've got an upper tier that separated itself from Florida and the rest of the bunch. And it's very much indicative of, or how should I say, it's very analogous to what we see in the SEC right now. Florida is winning the East and not able to stand up, to Alabama when they get to Atlanta. And I think you see the Alabama, the Ohio State, the Florida State, the Clemson, maybe a few others sneaking in there like LSU, but Florida is not winning any battles versus these guys head to head this year. And that to me is a concern. It's not
would you consider Clemson a powerhouse, Bill?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Clemson's was doing the exact same thing for the last 4 years that McElwain's doing now. When David, you put out the numbers about their class rankings the last 3 years. What did they break the top 10 one time, David? We put their numbers up.
No, 24/7 composite. Yeah, it was.
That's actually it's not a good comparison. I actually did a report on this.
Yeah, I know. I know you did. So I knew that was brought up.
They have not won an ACC championship without a top 10 class on the roster. And within 3 years, he had their recruiting rolling at that program. Now, we can take this class and say maybe this is the start of something from Clemson, but they always have recruited at a higher level within their conference that McElwain has achieved. I mean, they've been right there in the top 3 of the ACC for every one of these runs, because in order to get to the playoffs, you got to win your conference. And right now, even today, we're celebrating this. And what is Florida at 5 in the conference? That's just not going to cut it.
But do you think that if Florida was going against anybody but Alabama, that Florida would be more successful, especially
not necessarily?
But if LeBron Ray was not, if it wasn't between Florida and Alabama, Bill, I think LeBron Ray's a Gator. I mean, his family lives in Gainesville. I think he's a Gator today. If it weren't for Nick Saban, I mean, it just is what it is. It was down to Florida and Alabama. Florida had the last visit. Florida really touched his heartstrings. And I just think that, you're going against Alabama 9 out of 10 times, no matter who you are, you're going to lose. And Clemson just happened to be that one time, whether it's recruiting or, Nick Saban gets who he wants, when he wants, and how he wants. And that's just how it is to me, and that's what I was getting at.
Well, first of all, I say if frogs had shotguns, there'd be no snakes. And if I'm Jim McElwain, I say screw Alabama. And if he's going to be the head coach of the flagship University of Florida, he needs to rise up and fix the situation. I don't care what Saban's done. If we're going to just concede that, Urban Meyer can come in here and let's not get in his way. And, Nick Saban, I'm sorry, Lord Saban. Well, screw that, man. It's the University of Florida, and they won 3 national titles. Either recruit like a big boy or let's get somebody in here who can.
Has Saban ever lost out to another school in the last 2 or 3 years on a recruit that he's gone head-to-head with?
Well, I don't know. All the Sunshine Pumpers say that, he lost Pinero and he lost Perrine. I mean, yeah, he's going to lose recruits.
Yeah, that's because – yeah, I don't see him losing any 5 stars to any other school head-to-head.
Well, then let's go hire somebody who can go get them. Because everything is
we've been begging for that for a month.
Well, I don't think. Listen, I'm not saying we fired Jim McElwain because I don't believe Jim McElwain would tell you that. And I think the guy's a good coach, and maybe he makes it, and maybe he doesn't. But you just cannot. I mean, I'm looking down the top 20. If Florida is going to survive as a top-level program, they can't just concede that these schools are going to come in here and poach their talent. I mean, it's one thing at IMG.
Bill, Leatherwood was a Gator, Bill, and Saban strong-armed him into becoming a Crimson Tide.
Who was recruiting Leatherwood for Florida?
Leatherwood was it doesn't matter. Leatherwood wanted to be a Gator. He loved it here, his visit. He actually called Saban the night he returned from his visit and told him he was flipping. And Saban sent a booster to meet him in Tampa and drive him to Orlando to his house. And, they called it a grad assistant. I got the inside story. Bill Saban strong-armed Leatherwood into backing off on him flipping. Okay, that's
I'll
just
kill your mother, Alex.
Do so much. I mean, it might as well have been. It might, I mean, who knows? He might have dropped the bag. He might have threatened. I'm just saying he's strong-armed him.
You're obviously a bigger Bama fan than I am. Okay,
I'm not I am the anti-Nick Saban fan, anti-Bama fan.
I'm busting your chops. I get it about Leatherwood. Yeah. And I'm not talking about isolated incidents. I'm talking about the pattern. And one that I would identify that I think is a better example is Sean Wade at Trinity Christian here in Jacksonville, there in Jacksonville. I read the thing where he said, he let McElwain know he wanted to go out of state. No, he got recruited to believe that. These are impressionable kids, and they have to know there's a path for them. And they want to feel like they're going to be a part of something special and that they're going to succeed. And Urban Meyer is really good at that, but at some point there has to be somebody in the state that's a 5-star that McElwain says, I'm staking my career to yours, I'm hitching my wagon to you, and I'm going to land you no matter what. And that's why I suggested last time I was on the show, they need to go get a headhunter, whether it be Jawan Sider, or somebody like Loxley, that's got to be able to get just a couple of these guys. I mean, it can't always be, that's, those are
I agree. That does have to change. We know, when Urban Meyer was here, that's what was happening. When Ron Zook was here, when they were getting the top classes, not necessarily winning, but he was getting those type of guys and coming in, and that's where the recruiting rankings read that they got the top in-state talent to go along with that, and Florida was right and rolling. So let's get more into these recruits, I guess we should say. You guys, and I'll throw my favorite one out there first. I think I'll have to go. We're going to talk about our favorite recruits. Like I said, we're not going to mention every recruit here going forward. So just to keep it a little topical, probably our favorite recruit, and I'll combine the other topic I was going to go with this. Our favorite recruit that can maybe do something early and step on the field for Florida. So I'm going to go to the secondary where I think Florida needs a ton of help. With the departures of Jalen Tabor, Quincy Wilson. And now we know Duke Dawson. Maybe Chauncey Gardner gets the other corner spot. So I'm looking at the other, maybe nickel spot or the other corner spot according to what they do with Chauncey Gardner. I'm going to go with Brad Stewart to maybe come in and do something early in his career. I think he's pretty versatile to where he can line up at safety if he needs to, or I think he's going to get first crack at corner. And I know we talked about that on previous Gators breakdown episodes. I think he can come in and play corner. He can play nickel. He can, he's what I think I like about him the most is his instincts. He's smart enough already as a player in high school to recognize plays and pretty good instincts to come in as a freshman and make some noise. So I wish he was one that was already on campus and going through spring practice because I think that would benefit him even more. But the openings are going to be there for him to come in this secondary and make some noise. So I think he's got a good frame. He can even probably, bulk up a little bit, put a little bit, some more pounds on, some more weight on, especially if he's going to, play some nickel a little bit. So I'll ask you guys, do you have a recruit that you're just really ready to see come in and play for this Gator team? Bill, Joey?
Well, you took mine, and I'm going to agree wholeheartedly, Brad Stewart. Listen, I encourage everybody to go watch this guy's film. And the thing you will notice about him, he's the one guy I see in this class that is playing the game, and it slows down for him. You see him when he's got the ball in his hands, if he's picked off or, he's touching the ball on offense, the way he changes pace and he's setting up the defenders to make a move on them, 10 steps down the field, the way he drives through people when he hits, and he's just playing with a confidence. It's a confidence that I and I don't want to say that these other guys don't have it, but this guy looks to me like a guy that at least is going to get on the field on special teams and probably maybe in a nickelback role. But if all goes well for this guy, I'm telling you, this is an NFL DB.
Yeah, I'm going to go with your guy, Bill, that you talked about earlier, Elijah Conliffe. He has an SEC body, an SEC mentality already, and he hasn't even touched a college campus yet. This kid is huge and he's mean. We talked about this on Monday night, David. Elijah Conliffe is a guy that's going to play a lot as a freshman, as a true freshman. Playing the position that he plays in. Is a position that you can come in as a freshman and be successful. We saw Sharif Floyd do it. We saw Dominique Easley do it, and he reminds me a lot of Dominique Easley. We talked about that as well, David. He's got that nastiness, that mean, he just wants to hit and take a quarterback's head off every single time the ball is snapped. And I absolutely love that. And the fact that he doesn't even have to really put much more weight on or size, and he's already that way. I can't imagine what, a couple months, a summer is going to do in the Gators weight program. He's going to be a freak. And this guy's going to be a starter by the time he's a sophomore, and he'll probably be a 3-and-done player, Bill. I could see it.
I agree completely, man. The guy he doesn't even look like he carries defensive line fat at all.
For sure. And I guess we'll throw one in there. I guess it's kind of been if you look at the rankings from the other school or from the other recruiting services, from all of them combined, I guess I should say, and Florida's biggest recruit is Tadaro Slayton. Florida sold him on early that he'd be able to come in and play defensive tackle. That's what sold him as putting Florida as his leader early. He went to the Army practices and dominated on both sides of the ball, offensive line and defensive line. This guy, he's grown. He's a grown man, at 17, 18 years old, when it's, 6'4", 341 pounds. This guy, it's unreal. It's strong, really strong, can come in and, it does, Florida does have more need for him at defensive tackle. And we've talked about Conliffe there. So that's two guys that are probably going to come in and add some depth. And I want to see him at defensive tackle. I think that's where he should. But I wish there was a way to clone him and put him on the other side of the ball as well.
Now, you talking about Slayton or
yes,
Conliffe?
Slayton.
I think Slayton's going to end up on the offensive line. And I don't say that as a dig. I don't say that as like a knock on the class at all. I think that it's helpful to have, the extra numbers at defensive tackle right now. But I'm sitting here looking at this. If they can get Campbell and they can get Conliffe steady there and they can make it through this year and then bring a couple more freshmen in, the luxury of sliding Slayton over, who looks like he might be a future NFL offensive guard, to go with the two tackles you've brought in. They're the best pair of tackles you've brought in a while. Well, now suddenly you've got a 3-man offensive line class that's looking really good. And you've got a 3-man defensive, or at least a 2-man defensive line class or defensive tackle class. And that's not to count the prospects of possibly Carter bulking up and sliding into a 3 technique. Then suddenly, on both sides of the ball in the trenches, you just added some serious depth and quality depth, maybe like we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, and Bill, I think Conliffe, we saw Caleb Brantley, how successful he's been in the last 3 years at Florida, and he's probably going to be an early second-round pick this year. I think Conliffe's a better player than he is coming out of high school. I think he's a better talent. I think he's got more upside, and I think his floor is higher than Brantley's floor was. We had some questions about Brantley's motor, and McElwain came in and kind of pulled him up, these last 2 seasons. But Conliffe, you don't have to worry about a motor with that guy. He loves the game of football, and he plays hard on every snap.
He plays with violence.
He does, and it blows my mind that Tennessee and NC State and like Florida and these schools were like kind of his best offers. I just don't get it. He's the kind of guy that, Alabama, obviously, but Alabama never really pressed for him. I just don't understand. To me, he's one of the best defensive tackle prospects Florida's had in the last decade.
I don't really get it either.
I don't get it. I think he could have been a 5-star. I just don't see how so many recruiting sites whiffed on his ranking. I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he looks like, 4-star defensive tackle, but we've had a pretty good run of 4-star defensive tackles over the years with guys like Marcus Thomas, But how about this? Florida, sitting a few months ago, has their entire defensive tackle class done. Okay, they've got a JUCO, they've got 2 high school guys, one of them ranked in the top 15 or 20 in his position nationally. All 3 of them leave. They empty out their greatest position of need on the roster, lose everybody, and end up better off on signing day. Like, when does that happen? How do you have 3 guys leave your program and you get 3 better ones?
Yeah, it was Fred Hansard was the highlight of that, and ended up going to Penn State there. You're right. The Florida lost all those guys, and people thought the world was falling because it was a position of need, and it was. Now Florida's going to have to scramble to find their guys. It wasn't scrambling. They went out and pretty much got who they wanted at that position there. So that was a good catch, Bill. I know you.
And it's not just that they lost 3 guys. They lost them to Arkansas, they lost them to Penn State, and they lost them to Weight Watchers. That should never happen at the University of Florida. You got 3 defensive tackles jilting you for people that are beneath you. And then suddenly you end up with a pretty studly defensive line class. I mean, Joey, don't you think it's in the top 5 in the last decade?
Oh, absolutely. Florida's defensive line these next 2 years is going to be ridiculous. Look at who you got coming. You got Jabari Zuniga, who is a 3-star. I mean, Jabari Zuniga is a stud. I can't say enough good about him. And I'm excited to see Conliffe. I'm just really excited. That's all I got to say about him. I'm just excited. I already spoke. I think
we've had our Conliffe love fest. All 3 of us here so far on this episode. So if he catches this, just know Conliffe, we're big fans. One player I want to talk about, just because it was kind of the surprise right before Jim McElwain went to his podium for the press conferences. They found a way to get James Robinson in, and we've talked about it, Joey and I, especially you and I 2 days ago, because that's when that story hit, that the admissions that Florida would not let him come join. So of course, I don't know if we ever find out what happened there, if that was true or whatever, or if McElwain pull some strings to get that done and to get him in for maybe PR sake or, you know what, we really need this player. You know, who knows how McElwain pulled James Robinson in. But I guess the question I'll ask about him, he's a 4-star wide receiver. We know about his troubles off the field. Does James Robinson come in and make an impact year one?
Oof. I mean, look at his body. What is he, 6'4", 208, something like that? I mean, I tweeted this out earlier. I was like, he's got golds. And, you know, he's got a rough background. I said, I want him starting against Michigan. Florida hasn't had a player like this, you know, since Urban Meyer was here, and I absolutely love it. I'm ready for him to start right now.
I kind of think he might get targeted as much as Ahmad Fullwood did this year. I mean, it's, you know, I don't know how many times he was targeted. I expect him 5 to 15 catches, which is good, you know, but, you know, I can't believe I'm saying this, but for the first time, Florida might actually have a little bit of a tough rotation to crack at wide receiver.
That's why I was asking that question, just because, you know, I guess, Bill, you said Ahmad Fullwood. I could maybe compare him to another freshman and see maybe how he gets better as the year goes on. Maybe compare him to how Tyree Cleveland did this past year. Hopefully not with the early year struggles where he can't, or troubles where he can't get on the field. But I mean, Robinson and Joey mentioned it. I mean, 6'4", 190. You know, close. He'll be that receiver who can go vertical and get it, go across the middle, be a possession type of receiver, got to be the receiver that can move the chains, be a red zone type of threat. So it would be nice to see with the ball in his hands what he can do there in college, to see if he can still use that speed that we've seen in high school, to see if he can get away from some guys. But, you know, it's a big-time coup at wide receiver with Daquan Green and James Robinson. But we've mentioned, I mean, you got Callaway and Jay Massey coming back, and Powell and Swain and Hammond and Cleveland. You're right. I mean, the numbers at wide receiver and the complete transformation since Jim McElwain has taken over is adamant. It's there. You know, there are numbers there. There are guys you can count on. If the quarterback play can get better, you know, there are guys you can really count on at that receiver position.
One quick note on Tyree Cleveland. If Tyree Cleveland gets a quarterback that can throw him the football, he's a first-round draft pick.
Yeah, and maybe anyway. I think it's obvious for all to see. He may not get the touches because of the quarterback, but that guy's a pro waiting to happen.
Oh, yeah. So Gators breakdown. This is our recruiting recap, signing day recap here. Glad you guys could join us. Plenty of listens there on YouTube Live right now. So glad you guys could check it out. Plenty to talk about here. So I guess before we wrap it up, any other guys that really just catch your eye that's on the list? I mean, you know, Florida ended up with close to their number 25 coming into today. We didn't think they would get kind of close to it because we weren't sure about the James Robinson and Darius Lemon situation, you know, how that would work out there. But I guess one more recruit from you guys to say, you know, can we see him early, or are you just looking forward to their career as Gators?
I want to see what Kadarius Toney can do. You know, he's got a lot of quarterback film. But some of those guys that come in as athletes, and we know he's going to come in as a quarterback, especially for the spring when we're going to be down an arm. As we've talked about, we've got to sign more quarterbacks. You know, but for now, he's going to come in and do that. But eventually, this is going to be a guy that even by the fall, maybe he slides into a backup slot role, but gets on the field as a punt returner and kick returner. He's a quick twitch athlete that can start and stop on a dime, accelerate. He's got the second gear. I don't know if he has the top gear, but he's got enough shake and bake that he could make a difference in key moments this season.
How about a guy that committed today, C.J. Henderson? I mean, you got to be excited about him. If you watched him at the Under Armour All-American practices and the game, I mean, he's a stud. He's a guy that's probably going to be a starting cornerback by his sophomore year. He'll probably be a starter, and he's a guy that's going to return kicks, you know, return punts. He's just got elite speed, and he's a lockdown type corner. I think he's a guy that, like a Quincy Wilson, that you could literally just put out in an island and let him just shut down one side of the field.
Hey, did we sign our starting cornerbacks today? 2017 versus Michigan. Do either or both of the cornerbacks feature a guy in this class?
No, we got Frank or Trask.
No, corner.
Oh, corner. I mean Dawson. I mean, I'll say
Dawson
nickel.
and Gardner. I think.
Yeah, I'll say nickelback
Dawson
maybe.
and yeah.
So and then I threw Brad Stewart in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I see,
And don't forget Quincy Letton too. Don't forget Quincy Letton.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see that guy on the outside. I see him inside. But I mean, I guess it can happen.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, so I guess Bill, when you're saying corner, do you mean outside?
Yeah, not the nickel, just the two corners. I think there's a good chance that one of these guys comes into fall camp, whether it be Henderson or Marco Wilson, or hell, even Brad Stewart, and secures one of the starting role. Because if it's me, I'd like to keep Duke on the inside, and same thing for Johnson, if you can.
Yeah, I can see them trying to keep Duke on the inside just because how successful he is there. And if you trust one of these freshmen and throw them out there, I mean, heck, we've seen Florida do it before. They're not afraid to do it. But of course, well, we haven't really necessarily seen McElwain do it just because he walked into a great situation there with the DBs at Florida there. So I guess one more position I'll talk about before we wrap this up is what can Malik Davis or Darius Lemons do? Jordan Cronkite, of course, has since left Florida since the end of the season. We know the 4 running back rotation that started this past year. It bugged many fans while they were watching that. Jordan Scarlett, Michael Pirine, Mark Thompson, those 3 along with Cronkite. Do Malik Davis and Darius Lemons, are they that 4th guy, next year? Would they like to redshirt both? I don't see them redshirting both. So I would say to you guys, which one makes more of an impact, Malik Davis or Darius Lemons as a freshman?
Davis. I think Lemons has got redshirt all over him. I think Florida's so deep at running back right now, it's not even funny, which is a good thing. It's a great thing. But I see Lemons probably getting redshirted. To be honest, I'm actually quite surprised that Mark Thompson's even in the program anymore. He's had so many issues, as far as, fumbling the ball. It doesn't seem like he's reading, his holes correctly. He had a couple nice games at the end of the season. He played really well against Iowa, who has a really good run defense. But, Mark Thompson basically makes his money in the red zone. And, the first probably 3 quarters of the season, David, I thought he wasn't even going to be back with the team next year. I didn't, especially after his suspension and all that nonsense.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Malik as well if we're going to pick between the two, because there's just so much going on with Lemons right now. I mean, this is a guy who has had some academic troubles to the tune of not being in school this year. He's got as good as year in order. I think it would not be surprising if Mac says, look, I want you to practice and I want you to get in the rhythm of things, and really doesn't push him too hard to drink from the fire hose as far as the playbook, and you just let him focus on getting absorbed into the program and get him some stability, because they don't need him right away.
Right. And I think what I've seen from Malik Davis's film is he's a patient rusher, patient running back. He does a nice job of reading and seeing, what hole he can hit. And that's hard to teach in high school. A lot of those guys just want to go and, try and bounce out something to the outside to make a play or just run straight ahead. He actually reads blocks and can, and shows vision and shows balance to get upfield. Don't necessarily rush it, but he's patient to get upfield. So I think that's navigating through the clutter, I guess you could say. So that's what I like about Malik Davis, and I kind of agree. While I do like Darius Lemons, him missing a good portion of his senior year, it will probably maybe take him some time to adjust to college football for the Gators. So this is our signing day recap show here on Gators Breakdown. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Threw plenty at you. If you can go back and listen to it, I know it's live on YouTube now, but the audio podcast will be available on SoundCloud and iTunes shortly after, so you can check it out there. So, Joey, Bill, guys, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Stars matter.
Says
Saban's ruining college football.
Says facts and history.
There we go. So I'm Dave. Find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Joey on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports. Bill at Real B Sykes, and Gators Breakdown at Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook. Thanks for joining us, guys. Big day for the Gators. Nice finish, and we will see you guys later.